The sky above the alien city burned with a strange red glow as if the world itself enjoyed watching pain. The arena in the center of that city was massive, built of black stone, shining metal, and thousands of glowing alien runes that pulsed like the heartbeat of some ancient beast. The sound of the crowd echoed through the walls like thunder. Creatures from dozens of species filled the stands, each one more bizarre and terrifying than the other. Some had wings of bone, others eyes like molten glass, and many wore armor that shimmered like oil. Yet, all of them were laughing at the fragile creature standing in the middle of the arena sand. That creature was a human. Her name was Alara. She looked small compared to the giants around her, her skin pale under the heat of the alien suns. Her clothes were torn, her knees scraped, and her arms chained in glowing cuffs. She had been captured after her ship crashed on a forbidden planet ruled by the Velanar Empire, a civilization known for their cruelty and pride. They called humans soft meat, a species made only for labor or laughter. Today, Alara was not a warrior, not a soldier. She was entertainment for their crowd. From the royal platform high above the arena, the Emperor of Velanar leaned forward. His tall frame was covered in golden armor that reflected the red light like fire. His 4 eyes gleamed with hunger for spectacle. "Bring the beast," he commanded in a deep metallic tone. The audience cheered wildly, stamping their feet, waving banners, and chanting the predator's name. Alara closed her eyes for a moment. The air smelled of blood and metal, and the sand beneath her feet was still warm from the last battle fought there. She could hear the voices of the crowd mocking her, calling her weak, useless, pathetic. But under all the fear, there was a strange calm inside her. She had survived worse things than words. She had seen her colony burn, her father die, and her friends vanish in the smoke of war. Compared to all that, this was only noise. Then the ground shook. The massive iron gate across the arena began to rise, the chains grinding and screeching. A shadow appeared inside, tall, heavy, and breathing like a storm trapped in a cage. The crowd screamed with excitement. A deep roar rolled across the arena, making even the stones vibrate. Out of the darkness stepped a creature that seemed carved from nightmares. Its body was covered in thick black scales, its limbs strong enough to crush metal, and its eyes glowed with a deep red light. The announcer's voice boomed, "Behold, the predator of Kranos, the undefeated, the devourer of 10 champions." Alara's heart pounded, but when her eyes met the creature's, she froze. For a brief moment, she saw not a monster, but a memory. Years ago, when she was a child living on a far-off research colony, her father had saved a wounded alien beast, small, injured, and hunted. He taught her that every creature, no matter how terrifying, understood kindness. She remembered feeding that little beast, cleaning its wounds, and whispering to it when it trembled in pain. The creature had looked at her then with those same glowing red eyes. Now those eyes stared back at her from a creature 3 times her size. Could it be the same one, grown, changed, evolved? The thought barely had time to form before the crowd began chanting for blood. Kill her. Tear her apart. End it now. The creature took a step forward, its claws digging into the sand, its breath loud and heavy. The air was thick with tension, and even the Emperor leaned closer to see how fast the human would die. But something unexpected happened. The predator stopped moving. It tilted its head, as if confused. Its eyes narrowed, staring deeper at Alara. The entire arena went silent. No one understood. The creature sniffed the air, growled softly, and lowered its head closer to her. Alara took a shaky breath and whispered, "You remember me, don't you?" For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the predator let out a low, rumbling sound that was not a roar. It was almost a sigh. The Emperor's face twisted in anger. "Why does it hesitate?" he shouted. "Attack!" Guards near the edge of the arena raised their weapons, but the beast ignored them. Slowly, it turned its gaze toward the Emperor, its body tense, its tail slicing through the air with sharp precision. The crowd began to murmur. "It's broken," one alien hissed. "No, it's obeying her," another whispered, his voice trembling. Alara took a step forward. The glowing cuffs on her wrists cracked with static energy, but she didn't stop. She raised her hand, palm open, and touched the creature's armored chest. "You remember Mercy," she said quietly, her voice steady despite her fear. "And mercy is stronger than fear." The creature let out a deafening roar, but not at her. The guards who tried to approach were thrown aside like toys, their weapons shattering on impact. The sound shook the entire arena. Dust fell from the high ceilings, and the crowd screamed in panic. The laughter that once filled the air was gone, replaced by shock and fear. Even the emperor stepped back, his golden crown trembling in his hands. Alara stood beside the beast, her small figure dwarfed by its massive form. She turned toward the royal platform and shouted, "You called humans weak because we show kindness. You were wrong. Kindness builds loyalty, and loyalty creates power even you cannot control." No one spoke. The entire arena, once alive with mocking laughter, had fallen completely silent. Even the wind seemed to stop moving. The predator stood protectively behind her, breathing like a living wall of fire and muscle. In that moment, the galaxy's oldest truth shattered. The prey had become the partner, and the predator had chosen a side. The emperor's voice cracked with rage. "Kill them both." But no one moved. The soldiers who tried to obey were already frozen in fear. The predator's eyes glowed brighter, and every alien watching understood. The age of laughter had ended. Alara placed her hand again on the creature's arm and whispered softly, "We survived because we remembered who we are." The creature lowered its head beside her. Together, they faced the Emperor's army, human and predator, side by side. And that was the day the arena of laughter went silent forever. The arena was silent, its echo of laughter buried under the sound of heavy breathing. The sand was stained with blood, and smoke rose from the broken weapons scattered across the ground. Alara stood still, her chest rising and falling as she looked up at the golden platform above. The Emperor of Velenar sat frozen in disbelief, his claws gripping the edge of his throne so tightly that the metal began to bend under his strength. The crowd of thousands stared without a word, as if they had witnessed something forbidden, a predator bowing to a human. Zyra, the creature that once brought death to hundreds, stood beside her like a guardian carved from nightmares. Its massive body blocked her from view, tail curved protectively, eyes glowing a deep crimson under the alien sun. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, one guard, shaking, desperate to prove loyalty, screamed and raised his weapon. Before he could fire, Zyra turned with a sound that split the air and tore him apart with a single swing of its arm. The others dropped their weapons instantly. No one dared to move again. The Emperor finally rose, his golden armor glinting with light as his voice thundered through the air. "This is treason against nature," he shouted. "A beast does not choose prey. A human does not command life." His words carried power, but not conviction. Even he could feel it, the weight of something ancient awakening, something that frightened even rulers. Alara took a slow step forward, her bare feet sinking into the warm sand. The chains on her wrists glowed faintly, then shattered with a sharp metallic snap as if some unseen force had broken them. She didn't look afraid anymore. Her voice was calm but firm when she spoke. "You called me prey, but the universe doesn't listen to names. It listens to choices. And the predator has made hers." Gasps filled the stands. Some aliens looked shocked, others angry, but many just sat frozen, unable to understand what they were seeing. The Emperor gestured sharply to his general, a tall insectoid alien covered in black armor. "End this madness. Kill them both." The general saluted, his mandibles clicking sharply, and motioned for the heavy gates to open. A group of battle drones rolled into the arena, silver machines armed with plasma cannons, their red lenses scanning the targets. The crowd found its voice again, cheering for blood, hoping the spectacle would restore their sense of superiority. Alara glanced up at Zyra. "Do you trust me?" she whispered. The creature tilted its head slightly, its eyes glowing brighter, and let out a low, rumbling sound that vibrated through her bones. It wasn't words, but she understood the meaning. Yes, the drones fired first. Beams of blue plasma cut through the air, leaving burning trails in the dust. Zyra moved faster than anything that size should. With a single bound, it crushed the first drone under its claws, its tail slicing through another like a blade. Sparks and metal shards rained down around Alara. She ran toward the broken wall at the edge of the arena, using the chaos to her advantage. The spectators screamed and scattered as Zyra unleashed its fury, every movement precise, every roar echoing through the city above. The Emperor slammed his fist on the control panel beside his throne, his voice shaking with fury. "Seal the gates. Do not let them escape." But it was already too late. Zyra's claws dug into the wall, creating an opening large enough for both of them to slip through. Outside the arena, the air was thick with dust and the smell of burning metal. The twin suns hung low, casting long shadows across the ruins of the city. Alara ran through narrow streets, her heart pounding, Zyra following behind with earth-shaking steps. Alarms blared in every direction. They could hear soldiers mobilizing, ships lifting off from the spaceport, and the Emperor's voice echoing across the speakers, ordering their capture dead or alive. Alara stopped near an abandoned supply truck, breathing heavily. "We can't outrun them forever," she said softly. "We need to find a way out of this planet." She turned toward Zyra. "You understand me, don't you?" The Predator's head lowered slightly, its eyes locked on hers. It let out a low hum, a sound she remembered from long ago when she had healed its wounds as a child. In that moment, all her fear faded. She climbed onto the truck's roof, scanning the horizon. In the distance, she could see the mountains, sharp, black, and shimmering under the red sun. If they reached those peaks, they might find the old mines her father once mentioned, places where humans and predators had first met centuries ago during the ancient wars. "We go there," she said, pointing. "That's where freedom is." But before they could move, a shadow fell over them. 3 alien ships hovered above, engines glowing blue, ready to fire. Zyra growled, spreading its arms wide in defense. The first blast came down, shaking the ground. Alara was thrown backward, her ears ringing, dust covering her face. When the smoke cleared, she saw Zyra standing tall, protecting her with its own body. Its armor was burned, but it was still alive. She climbed to her feet, rage burning in her chest. "They won't stop," she said. "They'll hunt us across the stars." The creature looked at her, its eyes glowing fiercely, and growled once again, a sound that felt like a promise. Together, they turned toward the mountains, moving fast through the wasteland as the ships circled above. As the red suns began to set, the Emperor watched their escape from his throne, his expression dark and cold. "So be it," he said quietly. "Let the galaxy see what happens when monsters choose the wrong side." But even as he spoke, messages began to spread across the interstellar network. Recordings from the arena, showing the human and the predator standing together against an empire. Billions watched in silence. Some laughed, some cursed, but many, for the first time, felt something new, admiration. Far beyond the Emperor's control, the image of Alara and Zyra walking into the burning horizon became a symbol of rebellion. And though the Emperor swore vengeance, every alien who had once mocked humanity now whispered the same question with unease in their voices. If the predators choose the humans, who will dare stand against them? The twin suns of Velen-Ar set slowly over the blood-red horizon, casting long shadows across the broken city. Smoke rose from the great arena, its towers cracked and its gates torn open like wounds. The once proud place of laughter had turned into a graveyard of silence. Above it, in the golden palace built into the cliffs, the Emperor of Velen-Ar stood before a massive viewing window, staring down at the ruins of his empire's pride. His claws tapped against the marble floor, his 4 eyes glowing with cold fury. Behind him, his generals and advisors knelt in fear. No one dared to speak until he gave permission. The Emperor's voice broke the silence like thunder. "A human," he growled, his tone deep and sharp. "A human and a beast have made fools of us before the entire galaxy." He turned sharply, his golden cloak whipping through the air. "Billions have seen that recording. Do you understand what that means?" They saw the predator bow to prey. None of the generals answered. One of them, a lizard-like creature with scaled skin and trembling hands, dared to lift his head slightly. "My Emperor, we can send our fleets. We can destroy the entire system before the story spreads." The Emperor stepped forward, his claws closing around the general's throat before he could finish. "Fool," he hissed, his breath cold as ice. "It has already spread. Every network, every planet, every trade route, all whisper the same words. The predator chose the human. Do you know what that does to our control? He released the general, who fell gasping to the floor. Fear keeps our empire together. But if they start to believe humans can earn loyalty from predators, that fear becomes doubt. And doubt is death. He turned toward the massive holographic map projected before him, a glowing image of stars, trade lines, and colonies. He pointed to one of them, a small red dot labeled Kranos Sector. They are heading here, he said coldly. The creature's home world. It will protect her there. That cannot be allowed. The general nodded quickly. Shall I prepare the hunter fleets? Yes, the emperor said, his voice low but deadly. And send the bloodborne commanders. I want that human brought to me alive. The beast, kill it. Slowly. Far away, in the deep wastelands beyond the Velenar city, Alara and Zyra moved silently under the fading light. The sky burned orange and purple as the last rays of the sun fell across the mountains ahead. Each step they took sent small clouds of dust swirling into the air. Alara's body ached, but her mind refused to slow down. The image of the Emperor's face, his hatred, his disbelief, was burned into her memory. She knew he wouldn't rest until they were both dead. They stopped near the edge of a canyon. The wind howled softly through the rocks. Zyra crouched low, scanning the area with her glowing red eyes. We rest here, Alara whispered, sliding down beside a rock. She looked up at the stars beginning to appear above them, bright and unfamiliar. Somewhere out there, beyond those stars, was Earth. She wondered if anyone back home even knew what she had done, or if they would believe her if they did. She turned to Zyra. They'll come after us, she said quietly. You know that, right? The creature tilted her head slightly, letting out a deep rumble that sounded almost like a sigh. Then she looked toward the sky, her eyes narrowing. For a moment, Alara thought she could almost read the meaning in them. Determination, defiance, and something close to loyalty. Alara smiled faintly. Yeah, she said softly. I thought so too. The night grew colder. Strange lights flickered in the distance. Patrol ships, searching the wastelands. Alara reached into the small pack she had taken from the arena's supply drone. Inside were energy capsules, a data disk, and a single hollow tool. She pressed a few buttons, and the small device flickered to life, projecting a holographic map above her palm. A red marker blinked far away across the mountain range. There, she said. That's the old Kranos research outpost. My father worked there once. If we can reach it, maybe we can find a ship or a signal beacon. She looked up at Zyra. It's a long way, but it's all we've got. Zyra grunted softly, lowering her head so Alara could climb onto her back. The creature's scales felt warm against her skin. As they moved through the night, the stars reflected on the metal ridges of Zyra's body, making it look as if she carried a piece of the sky with her. Back in the Emperor's palace, the bloodborne fleet prepared for launch. Dozens of warships lifted off from the mountain hangars, their engines glowing red against the darkness. Each ship carried soldiers bred for one purpose, hunting and extermination. They moved with precision, their armor marked with the Emperor's crest. The leader of the squad, Commander Vrax, stood at the bridge window of his ship. His voice was low and sharp as he addressed his crew. The Emperor's orders are clear. Capture the human. Kill the beast. No mistakes. The ships broke through the clouds, vanishing into the dark of space, leaving behind trails of fire. The hunt had begun. By dawn, Alara and Zyra reached the edge of the mountains. The air here was thinner, colder, filled with the scent of minerals and ash. From the cliffs, Alara could see the endless desert stretching behind them, and in the distance, faint flashes of light. She knew what they meant. Ships. Hunters. Coming fast. We don't have time, she said, gripping Zyra's scales. We have to move. Zyra let out a low growl, muscles tensing, and began climbing the sharp rocks with astonishing speed. The ground below shook as explosions echoed through the valley. The first of the hunter drones appeared over the ridge, scanning with red beams. Alara ducked low, her heart racing. They found us, she whispered. One of the drones fired, the blast hitting the rock beside them and showering them with debris. Zyra roared, leaping forward and smashing into the drone with her claws, tearing it apart midair. The sound of destruction echoed through the mountains like a storm. More drones followed, but Zyra fought them fiercely, her movements fast and wild. Alara crawled behind a rock, covering her head as sparks rained down. "We can't fight them all," she shouted. "We need to reach the outpost." Zyra growled in response and began to move again, smashing through the last drone blocking their way. As they climbed higher, Alara turned to look back. Far behind them, the warships of the bloodborne fleet burned across the horizon like falling stars. She took a deep breath, her voice trembling but steady. "Let them come," she whispered. "If they want to see what a human and a predator can do together, they'll learn soon enough." That night, as the fleet closed in, the Emperor stood once again before his throne, his reflection shining in the cracked marble floor. "Bring me their heads," he said coldly. "I will burn their memory from the stars." But deep in the mountains, beneath the alien sky, Alara and Zyra were already preparing for something far greater than survival. They were preparing for a war that would change the galaxy forever. The night sky above the Kranos Mountains glowed with streaks of fire as the Emperor's warships descended through the clouds. Each engine left a burning trail that tore the heavens apart, and their thunder rolled across the land like the growl of some vengeful god. Down below, the wind howled through canyons of red stone, carrying the scent of smoke and fear. Somewhere among those shadows, Alara and Zyra were still running, two tiny sparks of defiance against an empire built on arrogance. Alara clung to Zyra's armored back as the creature bounded from one jagged ledge to another. The sharp air burned her lungs, but she refused to slow down. Every few seconds, she looked over her shoulder, seeing flashes of light in the distance, drones sweeping the cliffs, scanning for any trace of life. Her body ached, her arms trembled, yet her eyes remained focused on the dark horizon ahead. Somewhere beyond these mountains lay the old research outpost her father had once told her about, the place where humans had first met the predator centuries ago. If they could reach it, they might find shelter or a way to fight back. The ground shook suddenly as a drone exploded nearby, scattering shards of metal across the rocks. Alara ducked, pressing herself against Zyra's back as debris rained down. "They're getting closer," she whispered. Zyra growled in response, the sound deep and resonant, like thunder trapped in a cavern. The creature turned sharply into a narrow canyon, its claws scraping against the stone as it sprinted faster. For hours, they moved without rest, guided only by starlight and instinct. The farther they went, the stranger the landscape became. Massive skeletons of ancient beasts jutted out from the sand, their bones glowing faintly in the dark. The air was filled with faint hums, the echo of machines buried beneath the surface long ago. This planet was older than any empire, older than the Emperor himself, and its silence felt heavy with memories. At dawn, they reached the edge of a deep crater surrounded by twisted metal towers. The ruins of the old Kranos research facility lay inside, half buried, half destroyed, but still humming faintly with power. Alara slid off Zyra's back and stumbled forward, her boots sinking into the dust. "This is it?" she said softly, staring at the broken structures. "My father said this place was built during the first human-predator alliance, before the wars." She approached the largest structure, a dome cracked open like an egg. Inside, she saw the remains of old computers and glowing symbols etched into the walls. The air smelled of rust and ozone. Zyra followed her silently, sniffing the air with caution. The creature's eyes glowed brighter as it moved toward the center of the room, where a circular platform still pulsed with faint blue light. Alara brushed the dust off an old console. "Let's see if you still remember how to wake up," she muttered. She pressed a few buttons, and the entire dome trembled. Sparks danced across the walls. A holographic interface flickered to life, projecting images of planets, ships, and long-forgotten battlefields. The voice of an ancient AI filled the air, calm but faint. "Welcome to Kranos Research Base 09. Human presence detected." Alara smiled weakly. "Still alive after all this time," she whispered. "You might just save us again." But before she could do more, a deep rumble shook the ground. The air outside grew bright, too bright. Zyra turned sharply toward the entrance, letting out a roar that rattled the metal walls. Alara rushed to the doorway and froze. In the sky above, 3 massive warships were descending through the clouds, their engines burning blue. The Emperor's hunters had found them. "Here they come," she said under her breath. "No more running." She looked at Zyra, who stood tall, her muscles tensed, her claws gleaming in the rising sun. "This is our ground now," Alara said firmly. "If they want to hunt us, then we hunt back." The Predator growled low, as if in agreement. Alara ran back to the console and began typing rapidly, reactivating old defense systems. Turrets unfolded from the ground, their barrels rusty but functional. Energy shields flickered along the perimeter. "Come on," she muttered. "Just work long enough to make them regret coming here." Moments later, the first wave of enemy drones entered the canyon. Their scanners swept the ruins, red beams cutting through the dust. Alara hid behind a broken pillar, her heart pounding. "Now!" she shouted. The turrets came alive, firing bursts of plasma that lit up the morning sky. Drones exploded in fiery blossoms, crashing into the rocks. Zyra leapt into the chaos, slamming one drone into the ground and tearing another apart midair. The sound of battle filled the air, the clash of metal, the hiss of plasma, and the roar of the Predator. Inside the Emperor's flagship, Commander Vrax watched the fight through his tactical display. "Impossible," he hissed. "They're using ancient defenses." The Emperor's voice echoed through the communicator, sharp as a blade. "Then destroy the mountain. Burn everything." Outside, missiles rained down. Explosions shook the earth. The sky turned red and gold. Alara ducked behind a fallen beam, covering her ears as the shockwave rolled past. She glanced at Zyra, who stood amidst the fire, unharmed but furious, her eyes blazing like twin suns. "Fall back," Alara shouted, pointing toward a tunnel entrance at the far end of the base. They ran through the collapsing corridors as fire chased them. Dust filled the air, and the sound of destruction followed close behind. When they finally reached the tunnel's end, Alara turned back and saw the ruins of Kranos burning behind her. She clenched her fists, tears mixing with the dust on her face. "They destroyed history," she said softly. "They think that will stop us." She turned to Zyra. "But now they've given me a reason to fight." The Predator's eyes met hers, glowing brighter than ever. Far above, in his throne room, the Emperor watched the explosions from orbit. A smile twisted his face. "Let her run," he murmured. "Let her gather her strength. I want the entire galaxy to see her fall." But deep in the wastelands, the legend of the human and the Predator had already begun to spread. Among miners, rebels, and forgotten worlds, whispers carried like fire. They spoke of a girl who had tamed the beast of Kranos, of a Predator who bowed to no one but her. And somewhere beneath the burning sky, as Alara and Zyra disappeared into the tunnels, she whispered to the wind, "We're not the hunted anymore. Now, the hunt turns." The tunnels of Kranos stretched endlessly beneath the burning mountains, carved long ago by hands that no one remembered. The air was cold and dry, filled with the faint hum of ancient machines buried deep below the rock. Every sound echoed, every breath, every step, as Alara and Zyra made their way through the darkness. The glow from Zyra's crimson eyes was the only light, painting the stone walls with a ghostly red. For hours, they walked without speaking. The only sound was the distant rumble of explosions fading far above. The Emperor's ships had stopped firing, but Alara knew that silence didn't mean safety. It meant something worse, planning. She could feel the weight of it pressing down on her, heavier than the rock above their heads. Finally, they reached a wide cavern where streams of blue light ran like veins through the stone. Alara dropped her pack to the ground and sat down, her body shaking with exhaustion. Zyra crouched nearby, her massive form blocking the cold wind that whispered through the cracks. For a long time, neither of them moved. The silence was deep, not empty, but alive, filled with unspoken thoughts. Alara looked up at the glowing ceiling inside. "You know," she said softly, "I used to think silence meant peace. But now, it feels like waiting before something terrible happens." Zyra turned her head, studying her face. The creature's gaze was calm but unreadable. Then she let out a low, rumbling sound, not a growl, but something gentler, like a purr hidden beneath thunder. Alara smiled faintly. Yeah, maybe it's not so terrible when you're not alone. She reached into her pack and pulled out the small hollow device she had taken from the ruins. The screen flickered to life, showing static before resolving into an image, the map of the Kranos system, surrounded by dozens of transmission markers. These are distress calls, she murmured. Old human colonies, forgotten stations, places that were cut off when the Vel-Nar Empire expanded. They're still out there, waiting for someone to answer. Zyra made a deep sound in her throat, almost questioning. Alara nodded. Yes, maybe we can reach them. Maybe we can make them see what I saw, that we don't have to be enemies anymore. As the hours passed, she began to patch together old communication codes, sending weak signals through the buried network. She wasn't sure if anyone would hear her, but hope had a strange way of surviving where logic didn't. Far above, across the Empire's outer worlds, strange things began to happen. In mining colonies, laborers gathered around old screens showing blurred footage from the arena, the moment when the predator bowed before the human. On distant stations, traders whispered about the woman called Alara of Kranos, the one who tamed death itself. In the military halls of the Vel-Nar fleet, officers argued in secret. If the predators turn against us, one whispered, our armies are finished. Another spat back, it's just propaganda. But even as he said it, his voice trembled. Fear had already entered their hearts. The Emperor sat alone in his dark chamber, watching the spread of rumors across his star maps. Red lights blinked everywhere, communication lines alive with whispers he could not control. Silence them, he ordered. Erase every trace of her name. But it was too late. Names, once spoken, have a way of slipping through walls and codes. And this name, Alara, carried something the Empire could not destroy, belief. Back on Kranos, the silence broke with a soft hum. Alara looked up as her hollow device began to flicker. A faint voice came through the static, distant, broken, but real. This is Outpost 9, receiving unknown signal. Identify yourself. Her heart leapt. She pressed the transmitter close. This is Alara of Earth, she said quickly. I'm alive. I'm not alone. The predators, they're not our enemies. They can be allies. I need help to prove it. There was a long pause. Then another voice answered, clearer this time. You're the one from the broadcast, the voice said slowly. The human in the arena. Alara hesitated, then nodded even though no one could see her. Yes, she said. And I need your help before the Emperor destroys us all. The connection flickered and died, but the message had gone out. Somewhere, someone had heard her. She looked at Zyra, who tilted her head curiously. We're not alone anymore, Alara whispered. Zyra rumbled softly in response. Then she turned toward the darkness behind them, where faint movement stirred, the sound of claws on stone, breathing, shifting. More predators appeared from the tunnels, their eyes glowing like small red stars in the dark. One by one, they stepped forward and surrounded Zyra and Alara, their movements slow and cautious. Alara held her breath. Zyra let out a low growl, not of warning, but command. The other predators stopped and bowed their heads. Alara's eyes widened. You called them, she said softly. You brought them here. The largest of the new predators stepped closer, its body scarred and massive. It looked at Alara, then at Zyra, and let out a deep rumbling sound. An acknowledgement, a promise. The air seemed to thrum with energy. The silence that had filled the tunnels for centuries was gone. Something new had replaced it. Unity. Alara stood tall, looking around at the circle of glowing eyes surrounding her. They mocked us, she said quietly. They called us weak. But now, the ones they feared most stand with us. The silence isn't our prison anymore. It's our signal. She raised her hand toward the hollow device, which still flickered faintly. Send it again, she whispered to herself. Every channel, every world. Her voice echoed through the tunnels, carried by ancient systems long forgotten. This is Alara of Earth. The predators have chosen. The war they started ends now. Far away, on ships and planets, the message reached those who had waited too long in silence. Some wept, some cheered, Some simply looked to the stars and whispered her name. In his throne room, the emperor stared at the new reports flooding his console. His claws trembled, scratching deep lines into the metal. "The human has built an army of monsters," he muttered. His reflection in the polished floor seemed to sneer back at him. "Then I will show her what true monsters look like." But even as he spoke, the empire's power began to fracture. Colonies refused orders. Soldiers hesitated. The laughter that once filled the halls of Velenar was gone, replaced by silence, heavy and waiting. And deep beneath the mountains of Kranos, as Alara stood among her new allies, the silence finally felt different. It wasn't the sound of fear anymore. It was the calm before something unstoppable. She placed her hand on Zyra's scarred chest and whispered, "Let them come." The Velenar Empire had ruled the stars with arrogance for 1,000 years, laughing at every race that dared to resist them. But now, the laughter had gone silent. Across every world, on every ship, whispers replaced the jeers. The story of the human girl who stood beside the predator of Kranos had spread farther than the emperor's armies could reach. Soldiers spoke her name in secret, merchants repeated her legend in marketplaces, and slaves in the deep mines whispered her story to each other before sleep. The galaxy that once mocked humans now feared them. On Kranos, Alara stood at the edge of a mountain ridge overlooking the blackened valley where fire still burned from the last battle. The smell of smoke clung to the air, thick and bitter. The predators were rebuilding, not just weapons and walls, but purpose. Hundreds of them moved like a single living army, carrying steel, reshaping armor, repairing generators. The humans who had arrived from distant colonies worked beside them, their voices calm, their eyes sharper than before. Alara had become the center of it all, though she never wanted to be. She was no queen, no commander trained for war, but every creature on Kranos looked at her the way lost travelers look at a light in the storm. She carried that weight silently, her heart heavy but steady. Beside her, Zyra crouched, the great predator who once killed for sport, now guarding with loyalty. Her red eyes glowed softly, reflecting the rising twin suns. Her body was scarred, her armor cracked, but she stood strong as ever. Alara placed her hand on Zyra's shoulder. "He's coming," she whispered. "You can feel it too, can't you?" Zyra's tail flicked once, a low growl rumbling through her chest. Alara didn't need translation. The Emperor was coming, and he would bring everything. Far above, in the frozen silence of space, the Emperor of Velenar stood before his fleet's command window. His reflection stared back, golden armor, burning eyes, and a smile that was all venom. Around him, officers moved quickly, none daring to look him in the eye. The Emperor spoke slowly, every word dripping with cold rage. "She humiliated us before the galaxy," he said. "A human and her pet beast. The image of our defeat has spread across the stars. The people whisper her name instead of mine." His claws tightened on the armrest. "We will erase her from existence. Prepare the Devastator fleet." Engines ignited. Thousands of ships moved like black waves toward Kranos. The hunt had begun again. Down below, alarms echoed through the tunnels as Alara watched the sky darken. The first warships appeared as shadows in the clouds, their engines rumbling like thunder. "Positions," she called out, her voice sharp and clear. "Activate shields and ready the launchers." Predators roared, humans ran to control panels, and ancient defense towers came to life. Blue energy shields rose around the mountains, glowing like domes of light. Zyra leapt onto a ledge, her claws gripping stone, her body ready for battle. The Emperor's voice filled the skies through loudspeakers, deep and cruel. "You think you can hide behind monsters, human? You think this changes what you are?" Alara looked up, her face streaked with dirt and light from the shield's glow. "Yes," she said softly, but her voice carried across the valley. "It changes everything." The first strike came like a hammer from heaven. Fire rained from the sky, shaking the ground, melting the rocks. The shields flared but held. Predators rushed forward, forming defensive lines while humans manned plasma turrets built from scavenged ship parts. The valley became a storm of light and sound. Explosions, roars, screams, and commands shouted through smoke. Alara ran through it all, moving from station to station, helping reload launchers, fixing broken cables with her bare hands. Zyra stayed near, crushing enemy drones that broke through the line. Together, they fought as one mind and muscle, human and predator, not as master and beast, but as equals. When a squad of enemy soldiers broke through the shield line, Alara grabbed a fallen plasma rifle and fired. She had never been a soldier, but her hands were steady, her aim true. Each shot burned through armor. "You called us weak," she shouted through the gunfire. "Now look who's running." The soldiers fell back, and the predators surged forward, tearing through the next wave. The air filled with thunder as another Velen AR ship exploded overhead, struck by a barrage of plasma spears. The Emperor's fleet was bleeding. On his command deck, the Emperor slammed his fist on the control console. "Impossible," he roared. "They're beasts. Savages. They can't win." But even as he shouted, his fleet's formation began to break. Reports screamed through the comms. Shields failing. Engines hit. Ground forces overwhelmed. He stared at the screen showing Alara's face amid the chaos, covered in ash, eyes fierce, shouting orders like a warrior born from the storm. In that moment, the Emperor realized something he had never imagined possible. The girl he mocked as prey had become the symbol that could destroy him. On the ground, the sky burned. Dozens of Velen AR ships retreated through the clouds, their engines screaming. Zyra roared in triumph, and the predators answered with thunderous growls that echoed across the mountains. Alara climbed to the highest rock, her hair whipping in the wind, and shouted, "The empire that laughed at us now runs from us. Let them remember this day." Her voice reached every corner of the valley. The sound of victory filled the air, not wild, not cruel, but proud and human. In the Emperor's palace far across the stars, the silence was unbearable. For the first time in history, the great ruler of Velen AR said nothing. He only stared at the darkness outside his window. And so, the galaxy's laughter died that day. The mocking turned to fear. And in that fear, the legend of Alara and Zyra began to grow stronger than any empire's throne. The war-torn valley of Kranos lay silent beneath a silver sky. Smoke still curled from the broken war machines scattered across the plain, and the once glowing banners of the Velen AR Empire fluttered weakly in the cold wind. The morning light spilled across the ridges, touching the cracked armor of fallen soldiers and the scorched metal of their ships. The air smelled of dust, ozone, and victory. A strange, heavy victory that did not feel like triumph but like the birth of something new. Alara stood at the edge of the battlefield, her torn uniform flapping softly against the breeze. Around her, the predators moved slowly among the wreckage, collecting what remained of their dead and carrying them back to the caves with quiet reverence. The war was not over, but the first great battle had ended. The unthinkable had happened. The human and the predator had stood against an empire and survived. She looked up at the sky, where the Emperor's fleet had vanished hours ago. Only faint trails of smoke remained, fading into the clouds. "He'll return," she said quietly. Her voice carried over the wind, low but steady. "He's not the kind to accept defeat." Zyra stood beside her, the enormous creature scarred but alive, her crimson eyes reflecting the light of the burning horizon. She turned her head slightly, letting out a deep growl that rumbled through the ground beneath them. Alara smiled faintly. "I know," she said. "We'll be ready." For a long moment, they simply stood there, watching the sun climb higher. The world felt strangely peaceful. The mountains that had once seemed cold and lifeless now felt alive, breathing with hope. From far below in the tunnels, the soft sounds of movement echoed. The rebuilding of shelters, the gathering of survivors, the beginning of something larger than survival. Weeks passed. Word of the victory on Kranos spread faster than any ship could travel. Across the galaxy, screens flickered with grainy recordings, the image of a young human standing beside a towering predator, fire burning around them. For some, it was a tale of rebellion. For others, a warning. But for millions living under the Emperor's rule, it became something more. A promise that fear could be broken. On distant colonies, miners and traders spoke her name with awe. Alara of Kranos. They called her the girl who taught the monsters to fight for us. In hidden rebel networks, her message was played again and again, her calm voice declaring that the era of laughter had ended. Each time, more species joined the cause. Enslaved workers, forgotten mercenaries, even old enemies of humankind. What began as one woman's defiance had turned into the first spark of a galactic uprising. Back on Kranos, the predators had begun to change as well. Where once they hunted alone, now they built together. They raised stone walls and forges from the melted remains of enemy ships. They trained beside humans who had arrived from other worlds, brought by the rumors of Alera's rebellion. In the heart of the mountains, an alliance was forming, one built not on blood or power, but on trust. Alera spent her days walking among them, guiding, learning, and sometimes just listening. She watched children, both human and alien, play in the same dust that had once soaked in war. Each small moment felt like proof that something impossible had been achieved. And yet, at night, when the stars came out, her thoughts always drifted to the same place, the Emperor. She knew he was still out there. The galaxy might have begun to doubt him, but he was not a creature of surrender. He would rebuild, he would strike again, and when he did, he would bring with him every weapon and every army his empire could create. One evening, as the twin moons rose above the mountains, Alera stood alone on a cliff overlooking the valley. The air was cool, and the wind carried the scent of smoke and rain. Behind her, Zyra approached quietly, her massive shadow stretching across the stone. The predator lowered herself until her head was level with Alera's. "You know," Alera said softly, "when I first saw you in that arena, I thought I was going to die. I thought that would be the end of me." She smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. But somehow, that was the day everything began. Zyra rumbled, her eyes glowing warmer, and pressed her armored forehead gently against Alera's shoulder. It was not a gesture of dominance, but of understanding, an ancient predator's version of trust. Alera looked out at the horizon, where streaks of light moved slowly across the stars, new ships, not of war, but of unity. The first fleet of the Alliance, built by human engineers and predator craftsmen, rising together into the sky. "They'll come for us again," she whispered, "but next time, we won't just fight back. We'll make them remember what it means to stand against the free." Far away, in the cold chambers of the Vel-Nar throne, the Emperor watched those same reports. His reflection shimmered in the holographic projection, the human and the beast, standing side by side, surrounded by thousands of roaring warriors. His claws dug into the armrest of his throne until sparks flew. "So be it," he murmured. "If she wants a war of worlds, she shall have it. I will turn her legend into ashes." But deep inside, even he could feel it, the fear that had begun to spread through his empire like cracks in glass. For the first time in his reign, his people whispered behind closed doors. They wondered if perhaps the laughter that had once mocked humanity had been a mistake. Years later, stories of that war would fade into myth. Children on distant planets would whisper of the human who tamed the predator, of the roar that silenced empires. Statues would rise, some carved from stone, others formed from metal melted down from the Emperor's fallen ships. On every world where freedom took root, one phrase would be engraved beneath her image. "Remember the day the predator chose the human side." Alera would never return to Earth. She stayed on Kranos, the world that had once been her prison and had become her home. Under her leadership, the predators and humans built cities that touched the clouds and towers that sang with light. Together, they watched over the borders of the new alliance, ensuring that tyranny never rose again. And when night came, she would sometimes stand at the same cliff where everything had begun, looking up at the stars, her hand resting on Zyra's scarred scales. "They used to laugh at us," she would say with a small smile. "Now they tell stories." Zyra would answer with a low rumble, deep and peaceful, and together they would watch the galaxies drift across the dark sky. For in the end, it was not the Emperor's power that shaped history. It was a single act of compassion, a girl who once fed a wounded creature, that changed the fate of worlds. And so the legend lived on, the human who tamed the beast, and the beast who silenced the laughter of the stars.